All right, welcome back to our Splunk training. So in this session, we'll be discussing on the data onboarding part. So basically, as a Splunk admin or Splunk engineer, we will have to onboard the data from different data sources. When I say different data sources, it can be a Linux machine, or it can be a Windows, or it can be a web application, or it can be a database, anything, right? So Splunk say S for all the log files which resides on a particular servers. So as part of this, what I'm planning to do here, I am planning to set up a standalone uh, Splunk environment here. When I say standalone, I have a single computer. So in this computer, I have configured searcher as well as a indexer. So how can we configure a searcher? By default, when we install Splunk Enterprise software, it does act as a searcher. And if we configure triple N7 on a Splunk Enterprise, then it does act as a indexer. So if you can see, just click on distributed search. By default, distributed search is enabled. Hence, it is allowing. I mean, it is allowing me to consider this as a search it. Fine. So now allow to make this component as a indexer, right? So how to do that? So go to settings, click on forwarding and receiving, click on configure receiving, click on new receiving port, and just configure 997 port. So with this machine is also acting as a indexer, right? Okay. Now, typically, when it comes to real-time scenarios, this is not the case, right? So we will not be following these steps. So definitely we will be having a dedicated servers, like there will be a separate searcher, there will be separate indexers, and there will be many forwarders, which they will be sending the logs across our different application servers. Now, the reason I've chosen this topic today because before actually implementing anything on the production environment, right? So it is always good practice to test your data ingestion part in the test environment or in the dev, or it can be a lower environment. So in most of our organization, the test environment or the lower environments will not have a dedicated components. So either we'll be using standalone or somewhere we can use, we might be having a distributed setup as well. So for at least for our practice purpose, I'm just using this standalone architecture where I have configured searcher and indexer. So there are two ways to ingest the data, either, right? So even in this setup or for both the setups, there is something called as a universal forwarder, right? I think we have already had detailed discussions on reading the log from a universal forwarders and also pushing the configurations via deployment server, right? So we had a detailed discussions. Please refer back to my previous video. You will have a fair idea on it. So from the we just configured deployment server, and from the deployment server, we pushed some of the inputs and outputs configuration to this universal forwarder, and from the universal forwarder, we are able to send the logs to a indexer, and with the help of the searcher, we used to search the log files. This is the actual process. This is absolutely fine, but before actually getting a confirmation from the requester, right? Let's say, for example, you will receive a request, or you'll receive information to onboard some data from a particular server. For let us consider that application server can be a proxy lab, or it's a web server logs. If my requirement is to onboard this web server or proxy logs, right? So in that case, as a first step, we need to configure, or we need to get couple of lines of uh, data from the requester, and we need to ingest the data locally. So which means there are two types of ingestion of data. The first one is we'll have to ingest the data locally. And the second point here is that we'll have to ingest the data via universal forwarder or AV forwarder, whatever. So this ingestion of the data via universal forwarder we have already discussed. This is the official process which we will be following in our day-to-day activities. And what do you mean by ingest the data locally? So, which means from a requester, we will be getting around 600 or 1,000 lines of data, and then we will try to ingest them manually on this particular machine, and we will fine tune the data, and we will understand the data in a better way before actually getting ingested into a production environment. So in that case, for testing purpose, I always prefer to ingest the data locally, right? So here there are two types of ingestion. I can say we can ingest data locally. When I say locally, these things can be ingested to my local computer, so which is acting as a searcher as well as an indexer. I don't need to have a separate machine or separate forwarder to get the data into a Splunk. But the official process, we need to ingest the data via some forwarders. All right. Okay. Now, by considering this fact, so let us try to ingest some data locally, and let us try to understand how exactly it works. Right. So in this session, I'll just concentrate on the data ingestion part, and in the next session, we'll see how to search the data in detail, and also we'll go through some of the commands which we'll be using in our day-to-day activities. Right. All right. Now I have downloaded a couple of files in Splunk. So I'll be sharing you this description I'll be sharing you this link in the description. Probably you can just go ahead and download this link. And for now, I have three types of logs. So one is access 30 days logs and DB logs and Linux log. When I say access 30 days logs, let us see how it works, how it looks. See, before actually getting started with any ingestion of your data, you need to understand the data format and the content, at least for some extent. And later, definitely you can play around with the configurations if you understand the data. And if your requester comes and asks you to just create some dashboards and reports, if that is the case, we need to have at least fair understanding on the data part. As of now, when I say access 30 days log, by looking at these logs, I can say I can see one IP address here. IP address is referring to another computer, and this is the timeline which I'm seeing, and this is the date and time and post. So if you have little idea on the web servers and the web requests, how it works, right? Then you will have a definitely you will understand this post and get and all. So post in the sense, if you want to insert some of the records, we prefer post, and if you want to get something from the web server, then we use a get and we use put, delete many, right? For example, by considering this is a post request, and what is the request customer is sending? This is the request URI is sending, and 200. When I say 200, it's a success code. So in web server world, we have 200, 504, 500 internal server error. All those, these are the code which will be omitted as part of the particular transaction in a web server. So and also here the customer or some requester is trying to hit this website, and again he's using Mozilla and using Windows machine, right? So with this information, I can say that this is a web server or proxy logs. So if I get this confirmation, then definitely I need to look into a couple of the category ID or couple of product ID, or so we need to get some details in it. And once we have these details, then we are good to go ahead and ingest the data locally. Once again, I'm reiterating, why are we concentrating on the ingesting the data locally? Because there will not be any harm while ingest this data locally, so that we can thoroughly test the data, we can understand the data before actually getting into the production environment. So that's the purpose. We need to understand the data. As of now, this is the access 30 days logs. Okay. And similarly, let me open this CSV file in the notepad as well. And when we ingest some data, and when Splunk receives data in a format of CSV refers comma separated value, Splunk will be very much happy, right? So here we see a time, type, command and duration, right? So accordingly, see, this is a time and this is a type is query, and this is a command which is executing, and what is the duration? It's a 29 second, right? So by looking at this log, definitely we can say that, yeah, it's a database log. And similarly, let us look at another log. This is a Linux log. So if you go to Linux machine, if you go to var log, under var log, you will see a couple of log files. There you can see Linux underscore secure.log file. So I've seen many, so that's the reason I'm just confirming that I know this is a Linux secure log. Why I'm now mentioning as a Linux secure log? Because it does authenticate all these activities. Say someone is trying to do SSH, and this is SSH ID, and he is a user, and he's trying to log in from this machine with the help of this port, but login got failed because of some invalid credentials. And probably you can say that, okay, accepted password for this user from this location. So he is able to successfully log into this particular from this machine, right? So by looking at the log, I can say that, yeah, it's a Linux secure log. All right. So we just got a little understanding on these log files, and let us ingest them locally one by one. All right. And as we know, we have already configured this particular instance to work as a searcher as well as a indexer. So I'm just using a standalone architecture, a standalone machine. So how to ingest the data locally? Just go to settings, click on add data. If you click on this option, you will see two options. One is upload and monitor and forward. So when I say upload, this is for static data to be uploaded. So if you say, let's for example, how many lines of there? So 1,31,646 lines are there. So which means after you ingest this particular data, then you must see 1,31,639 data only, these many rows only, these many lines only. You cannot add few more additional lines of data to this file. So if that is your requirement, please go ahead and choose this option. No, somewhere your data is growing, right? Data is not static. So in that case, please go ahead and use monitor option. We will see both the option. For now, let me try to ingest this log file, right, with the help of this upload. Why I'm just selecting this option? Because whatever the data which I'm seeing, these are all in my local disk. I'm just trying to ingest this data to check the behavior of this particular data. So that data definitely, I'm pretty much sure about this data will not grow dynamically, because these things I've just downloaded. I'm just playing around with the configuration. If that is your case, then please use this upload option. All right, now click on select file and click on access 30 days .log file, and please make sure that your data should not exceed 500 megabytes. And yes, it has been successfully uploaded. Click on next. Now see the beauty of Splunk here. Just look at the log file here. This is the log, an access 30 days log, which I'm trying to ingest. If you can look at here, definitely there are so many log files, or there are so many piece of code is there, and which will be tedious to understand, which will be bit difficult to understand all this terminology and everything, right? Look at the magic here. When I have not ingested completely, but I'm in a process of ingest this data into Splunk. It has already extracted, and it is giving me in a such a nice way that I can just understand the data based on some criteria. We will see what are those criteria, right? Just have a differences, by looking at this data and the data which is in Splunk, right? So it has somehow it started extracting the time, and also when it comes to Splunk, the data will be converted into a events, which means out of 1,31,646 lines of code, it has extracted each and every line as a event. So when I say this is a event and this is a another event, right? And there should be some way Splunk should understand and Splunk should identify the data, right? Otherwise, it will be very much difficult to bifurcate the data in a such a wonderful way, right? How exactly it got, Splunk has identified this data, right? The only one way is that there is something called as source type. Source type talks about the data format. Source types talks about the data, what kind of data it is, right? So in by default, Splunk has a lot of configurations. Splunk has a lot of configurations within it so that whenever a new data comes in, it does check with the internal source types which are available within the Splunk. If the data is somewhat different and which is not identified by Splunk, then we will have to create our new data sources. Please understand. So source type is very much important while onboarding the data. In most of the cases, Splunk will have some default configurations which can suffice most of our requirement. In some cases, if the data is not matching as expected by Splunk, then we might need to define a new data sources. When we talk about data ingestion, right? So definitely this is something called as parsing, right? So parsing is happening here because the data is in some other format, which is unstructured. And now I'm just converting this unstructured data into a structured data in a visible in a visualization way, right? So in this case, there should be something is happening in the background or some configurations which resides in Splunk, which is giving me these options. Yes, definitely. That is something called as props.configuration file. Basically, this props.configuration file will help us in parsing the data while onboarding, right? And this is the only file, this is the only props.configuration file can be used in different levels, which means this props.configuration file can be used in forwarders, it can be used in the level of indexers, and also it can be used in the level of searchers as well. What are these props.configurations and what is this source type access underscore combined underscore W cookie? I'm talking about props.configuration, right? Let us get into the Splunk installations. So, see, let me get into program files, Splunk, etc. Let me go to system. I don't see any configurations of props because we just configured it now. Now let us look into default folder. Yeah, this is a props.configuration file I was talking about. So while ingesting this particular file, and while ingesting this access that is log file, while receiving this data, Splunk has identified that, okay, this particular format, it is somewhat, it is, matching with access underscore W cookie. Let us search what is access combined and underscore W. See, this is a piece of code which helped to format the data, to ingest the data. Look at here. So this is the access 30 days of logs, right? This for this log file, right? There is a props.configuration file which is in the Splunk, which notice that this particular data format, whatever I'm receiving, it can match with this data source. Hence, Splunk has by default has assigned this access underscore combined underscore W cookie as a source type. And please look at here. So there are some source type which is already there in the section of web server. So yes, with this we can confirm that we are ingesting web server logs, right? So because Splunk has also identified that one of the source type under web server. Now look at here. You can see some time prefix which is starting with open braces, right? So if you can get into this one, it has identified that the line has been broken with some criteria. Whenever we see /n, now we'll discuss in detail about the rejects part. For now, this is how it has the Splunk has identified a date. How? See, there is something called as time prefix, which is starting with open braces, and till how much character it can look ahead, it can look for 128 character whenever it sees a open braces, right? So similarly, it just identified this particular it just extracted this time range from this particular timeline, which is in the log file. Are you understanding what I'm saying? See, this parsing will be taken care while ingesting our data. So we are in the process of ingesting our web server logs. Then we have a Splunk has identified appropriate props or configurations, and where it has identified a access combined W cookie. So that's the reason here we are seeing this as a data type. I mean, sorry, this as a source type. And if we can look into the detail of this source type, here we have a time underscore prefix, which is starting with open braces. So which means whenever a Splunk sees this in the beginning, then it considers this the whatever the content we see after this braces, so that will be considered as a time. So hence that has been extracted as a time. Of course, we in our upcoming session we will also see we will also extract couple of customized fields going forward, and also we can assign some values as well. We will see. So I just wanted to make sure that so this is the way where exact and this is how Splunk has parsed the data with the help of access underscore combine underscore W cookie source type, which is available in props configurations. Where exactly it is there? It is in uh, system default location. All right, so with this, we are good to. So I don't see any issues. If we see any issues, definitely it will be listed down here. So I'm fine with this. So let me click on next. Just to identify, I'll just give the host name as something, right? Or it's a web server, right? So web server logs. All right. And if you want to mention default one, fine. But for now, let me create a new index. I'll just say a test. I click on events and click on set. Now we are trying to ingest this log from this server or from this host on this particular index, right? You can validate all those things, click on submit. Right, now we can search, but again, let me add few more data as well. So just click on add more data, click on upload and select a file. Let me ingest DB logs as well. See, we are good because whatever the data which I'm ingesting, which is less than 500 MB, click on next. Look at here. You can see much better way compared to a previous web server log, right? Because it is clearly saying we have a time, we have a command, we have a duration, time, everything, right? If we can look at here, these are all the key value pair, right? So it's a comma separated value. This is something called, this is a key and this is the value, and this is a key, this is the value. For command, this is the key, and this is the value which I'm trying to execute, right? So hence it has passed such a way that the data should be clear enough. Now let us check where exactly CSV file. Definitely it should be in the props.configuration file, right? Let's say CSV. See, so Splunk has identified this CSV stanza in the props.configuration, and it has considered this is the fit and this is the right source type which I can offer to the end user. I mean to the Splunk admin. So it is giving me I'm just in a process of ingesting the CSV file, and it has clearly called out, hey, you are ingesting a CSV file, and I have some source type in default. Let me try to suggest something. So by referring that, it has suggested this CSV file. Just to now, data looking very good. I'm happy with this data, but just to showcase, maybe I'm not happy with this. Probably I may need to customize this data in future. If that is the case, you need to change your source type. How to define your own source type? Just click on Save As and give something like CSP DB test, something like this. And in which app, and please do not change the category here, let it be structured, and click on apps. Now here you'll have to mention on which app this particular source type should get stored and implemented. So for now, let me just select search and reporting, click on save. By this point of time, I must be now creating, there is already props.configuration already created in sublocation. We will see that. So for now, I'll just say this is DB, or I say Oracle. And let me also ingest this data into test, click on review, submit. Now this is also done. Now, if we can go back and look at the configurations, let us look at the under local. Under local, we don't see any of the props.configuration. Why? See, we have a props.configuration in default, and we did modify the props.configuration. We did modify the source type, but we are not seeing under local, because definitely it will not show here because we are in a under system local. But while defining a new source type, we did refer to app called search. So definitely there will be a props configuration will be created under etc apps under search. Definitely it will be under local. Please look at here. Look at the timeline, right? So just created 2 minutes before. So this is a props.configuration file which got created as part of our changes. Now, see, this is a line breaker. We will discuss, what is line, should line merge and everything. If you want to extract additional fields, then probably we need to definitely we need to edit this configuration under this location, under this under apps search local location. Right, so this is how we will we can create our own source type, and you can also see the respective configuration files which gets created under a particular folders. All right, we are left with another one. Let me add another data as well. So click on upload, select, and let us say Linux. So purposefully, I did some changes on this one so that it should not, Splunk should be confused with the data which I'm providing. Hence, it has not selected any of the data. The reason I've chosen this file, I want to show you the differences. So in the last two uploads, when we upload the first web server log, Splunk is able to identify, and somehow it was correlating with a source type called access combined W cookie. And when we ingested a CSV file, the database log, Splunk has identified that yes, it's a CSV file, and it has pre-populated the source type. But still, just to showcase how to create a new source type, then we just created our customized one and we saved it, and it gets stored in the Splunk home etc's apps and under search local folder. Now the data is coming good, but still somehow my Splunk is not able to identify the source type. But by looking at the log file, I can say that this is definitely this is of Linux secure log. Let us check if we have any Linux secure source type in Splunk. How to search that? Just click on source type. See, if you remember, we have already created a dedicated source type called CSV something underscore DB test, right? Yes, right. So this is the one we have created. It is also listed down here. So similarly, let us try to search something called as Linux audit. Yeah, we have Linux secure. See, once again, why I'm selecting Linux. See, I can also select Linux audit, right? Things will work. But by looking at the config, by looking at the logs, I can confirm that definitely this belongs to Linux secure. In Splunk, it is always good practice to analyze the data and give a appropriate source type. So hence, I'm just selecting Linux secure because I feel that Linux secure is the right source type by looking, no, after looking into these logs, right? And fine, click on fine. Let me give this is Linux secure, and let me also try to index the same index into same index. Fine. Now we are good. We have all the data in Splunk. Now go back to search and reporting app. Uh, the first criteria to search any of the data, the good practice is that please use index name, right? So if you just see index is equal to test and we are looking for 24 hours, then we're not seeing any data. Why? Let us see. Let us try to increase the timeline. See, I did not see the data for last 24 hours because the timestamp, the data which got ingested, which is of the previous date, not for today's date, right? So it is always good practice to search the data with the minimum timestamp, with minimum time duration. And if you don't find them, please increase your search time. So if I just mention 30 days of duration, I could see 200 and I mean 2 lakh 13,000 events. If I just go with all time, let us see how much of data is there. Yeah, let's wait for some seconds. It is still searching. See, we couldn't. This is the maximum data we have in Splunk, which we have stored in the index called test. Right. So this is one way of searching the data. So as I mentioned, it is always good practice to search the data by referring to indexer. What will happen if you don't specify the index, right? This is a wildcard entry star we say. So which means if you don't know what are all the index which are available in the Splunk, then we'll just search with wildcard, which means whatever the index, right? So it does store some data if at all, if it has any. So as of now, from 60 minutes, none of the data it is showing. Let me increase to for us, increase to 24 hours. Let me go to 30 days. Look at here, right? So, but this is not the good practice to search any data. Please go ahead and give your give your dedicated index so that you get a valid data from Splunk, right? So yeah, so that's it for now. So in the next session, I'll be discussing more on the Splunk commands and how to analyze the data and everything. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye bye.